They say the heart remembers things the mind forgets. And maybe that's why, even after everything that happened, my memories of her still feel like warm sunlight on a winter morning, soft, familiar, and impossible to erase. Her name was Ina. We lived in the same neighborhood, just 2 houses apart, our childhood stitched together by dusty streets, shared secrets, and after-school ice creams. I don't remember the first day I met her. Maybe because she was always there, like the sky, sometimes cloudy, sometimes bright, but always present above everything in my life. What I do remember is the first time she held my hand. It was the day we both got lost during a school picnic. She wasn't scared at all. She just held my hand, looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, and said, "It's okay. We'll find our way home together." I believed her. I always did. As we grew older, our connection only deepened. We went from drawing butterflies in our notebooks to sharing whispered dreams beneath the old banyan tree behind the school. I would tell her how I wanted to be someone big, someone respected. She'd listen with that thoughtful tilt of her head and say with absolute certainty, "You will. I know you will." Her voice was always the calm in my storm. Ina was the kind of girl who didn't need to try to be special. She just was. She had this quiet confidence, the kind that made people turn their heads without her ever seeking attention. She laughed easily, felt deeply, and cared more than she ever admitted. And somewhere between our silly fights and long summer evenings, I started falling for her. Maybe I fell the day she patched up my knee after I crashed my bicycle. Maybe I fell that afternoon she cried because her cat went missing and hugged me like I was the only anchor she had. Or maybe I fell gradually, day by day, as her presence became something I couldn't imagine life without. But I never told her. I was afraid of ruining what we had, afraid she didn't feel the same, afraid of losing the only constant in my ever-changing world. So I kept it inside, letting my feelings grow quietly, safely, secretly. People around us noticed, though. Our teachers teased us. Our friends said we acted like an old married couple. Even my mother once asked me, smiling knowingly, "Beta, when are you going to tell her?" I always brushed it off. "It's not like that," I would say. But deep down, it was exactly like that. It was everything. Ina, for her part, never said anything either. She just treated me the way she always had, gently, comfortably, especially. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this unreadable expression, as if she was trying to understand something inside herself. But she'd always look away before I could ask what she was thinking. And I never pushed. Life felt simple back then. We walked to school together, studied side by side in the library, and shared snacks on the rooftop when our families didn't notice. Every memory of her is tied to the small joys that made childhood feel golden. I remember the way she used to sit on the swings after sunset, letting the soft orange glow wrap around her like a halo. She'd close her eyes and let the wind push her back and forth. "You look peaceful," I would say. She'd smile without opening her eyes. "I feel peaceful when you're here." Those words stayed with me. Sometimes I wondered if she meant more by them, if there was something hidden behind the softness in her voice. But fear kept me silent. I was young, unsure, and too scared to openly love someone who meant the world to me. But even without confessing, there was something undeniably special between us. Something pure, something unspoken but deeply understood. Something I thought would last forever. But the world has a strange way of changing as we grow up. Innocence fades. Friendships shift. Priorities transform. Yet in those early years, I was convinced nothing could touch what we had. One moment stands out clearly, her 14th birthday. It wasn't grand, just a small gathering at her house. After everyone left, she and I sat on the rooftop surrounded by fairy lights her mother had hung earlier. She leaned her head on my shoulder, something she'd done before, but that night, it felt different. Softer. Intimate. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "that some people are meant to stay in our lives forever?" I looked at her, at the way the lights reflected in her eyes, at the closeness of her breath. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." She smiled then, slow, meaningful. And for a moment I thought she'd say something more. Something that would change everything. But she didn't. She just closed her eyes and kept leaning on me. And I stayed perfectly still, afraid to break the moment. I wish now that I had asked her what she meant. I wish I had told her how I felt. I wish I had understood that childhood promises don't always survive the teenage years. But back then, we still lived in a world where we believed they would. We believed nothing could pull us apart. We believed we had time. We believed growing up wouldn't change us. Looking back, I realized that chapter 1 of my story with Ina was the sweetest, purest era of my life. A time untouched by jealousy, pride, misunderstandings, or heartbreak. A time when love was simple, when feelings were honest, when everything felt possible. A time before life taught me that even the girl you grew up loving can become a stranger. Or worse, someone who tries to hurt you just to see if you still care. But that part comes later. For now, this chapter remains exactly what it was. The beginning of a love story I never expected to let go of. If chapter 1 of my life with Ina was sunlight, then chapter 2 was the slow, creeping shadow that followed it. Quiet, subtle, and almost unnoticeable until it covered everything. Distance never arrives suddenly. It grows in the small spaces between moments. Spaces you don't realize are there until they become too wide to cross. And that's exactly what happened with us. It started the year we moved to 9th grade. Ina's world began to expand, and mine didn't. She became more social, more outgoing, more curious about everything outside our childhood bubble. New faces entered her life, girls who giggled too loudly, boys who tried too hard to impress her. Suddenly she wasn't just my Ina, the girl who spent every afternoon talking to me under the banyan tree. She was changing, and I didn't know how to follow. At first, the changes felt small, too small to worry about. She started walking to school with a group of girls instead of waiting for me at the corner like she always did. She didn't stop sitting with me in class, but she paid attention to others more, participating in group discussions, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of, drifting toward a life that didn't revolve around the two of us anymore. One day, I waited outside her classroom after school like I always did. She came out with her new friends, all talking excitedly about some event. She saw me, smiled for a second, then said, "I'll catch up with you later, okay?" Later didn't come. That was the first crack. The second came a week after. We were supposed to study together for a test. I went to her house at the usual time, but her mother opened the door and said, "Ina already left. She went to the library with some classmates." I nodded, pretending it didn't sting, pretending I didn't care that she had made plans without even telling me. But I did care. More than I should have. I remember walking home that day feeling like a stranger in my own story. The girl who once said she felt peaceful when I was around didn't need me the same way anymore. And I didn't know what to do with that. Still, I told myself it was normal. People grow, friendships evolve, life changes. I convinced myself it was temporary, that she'd come back, that we'd find our rhythm again. But the truth is, once distance starts growing, it rarely stops on its own. It only expands. It expanded during recess, when she began sitting with new people while I stayed with the ones I had always known. It expanded during school events, where she would wave at me from afar but rarely walk over. It expanded when she started talking about things I didn't understand, new songs, new shows, new jokes, new people. I was there, but somehow no longer included. And every time she laughed with someone else, a small part of me wondered if she even noticed the gap forming between us. One afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to ask, "Are we okay?" I said quietly as we walked home together for the first time in weeks. She looked confused. "Of course we're okay. Why wouldn't we be?" I shrugged, pretending to smile. "Just feels like we don't talk as much." She laughed lightly. "We're growing up, you know? Life's getting busier." I nodded, but inside something tightened. Growing up shouldn't mean growing apart. But maybe she didn't see it the way I did. That was the day I realized she wasn't drifting intentionally. She was drifting naturally. She was evolving, and I was holding on to what we used to be. The distance didn't hurt because she was leaving. It hurt because she didn't realize she was. But the real turning point, the moment that made me understand things would never be the same, happened a month later. It was sports day. Ina used to drag me everywhere on that day. Food stalls, game booths, random activities she knew I hated, but did anyway because it made her smile. But that year, she barely spoke to me. She was surrounded by new friends, cheering loudly for someone on the field. I didn't know who it was until someone whispered next to me, "She's cheering for Farhan." Apparently, they've been hanging out a lot. Farhan, the new boy at school. Confident, athletic, charming. The kind of guy who walked like he belonged everywhere. I tried not to think about it. But every time she shouted his name, my heart felt heavier, like a stone sinking in slow motion. I watched them from a distance, her smile, the way she leaned forward, the spark in her eyes. It was the same spark she used to have when she talked to me. And suddenly, the distance didn't feel accidental anymore. It felt like a door closing, quietly, slowly, without her even noticing I was still standing behind it. When Farhan won the race, she ran to him with her friends, cheering, laughing, celebrating. She didn't even look in my direction. I went home early that day. That night, I sat on the rooftop alone. The same place where she once leaned her head on my shoulder and asked if people were meant to stay in our lives forever. But now she was drifting toward a world that didn't seem to have a place for me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Still, I didn't blame her. People change. Feelings shift. Childhood bonds don't always survive the storms of growing up. But that didn't make the silence any less painful. Days turned into weeks, and the space between us grew into something neither of us talked about. She still smiled at me. She still waved. She still said hi in the hallways. But it wasn't the same. Her smiles were shorter. Her waves were distracted. Her greetings were rushed. It felt like watching someone you love through a window, close enough to see, too far to reach. The worst part was that she didn't seem to notice anything wrong. To her, we were still okay. To me, we were slowly unraveling. That's when I realized something important. Distance doesn't hurt when someone stops caring. It hurts the most when they don't even notice you're losing them. And somewhere between silent mornings and lonely walks home, it became clear that the girl I grew up loving was slipping away from me. Not by choice. Not out of cruelty. But simply because life was pulling her in a different direction. A direction where I didn't know how to follow. A direction where I wasn't sure I belonged anymore. If distance was the warning, then he was the turning point. Farhan. A name that would later define the beginning of the storm in my life. But back then, he was just a new boy with a loud laugh, expensive shoes, and the kind of confidence that made everyone notice him the moment he walked into a room. And Ina noticed him too. I could tell the very first time she said his name. Her voice had a certain brightness to it, new, curious, almost excited. "Have you seen the new guy?" she asked casually, though her eyes betrayed her interest. "He's in my science group. He's actually funny." Funny. I used to be the one who made her laugh without even trying. But now her laughter belonged to someone else. At first, I tried to ignore it. Tried pretending he was just another classmate, another temporary presence in her expanding world. But it quickly became clear that he was more than that. Farhan was everything a teenage girl might admire, confident, athletic, charming. The kind of boy who knew how to speak, how to draw attention, how to make people feel seen. The kind of boy who stood exactly where I didn't. The days that followed were filled with small but painful reminders that things were changing faster than I could understand. One afternoon, I entered the library and saw Ina sitting with him. She used to save the seat next to her for me, always without fail. But that day, Farhan sat there, leaning close as he pointed something out in her book. She looked comfortable, happy. When she saw me, she waved cheerfully. "Hey, we're just studying. Join us." Her voice was friendly, warm, innocent. She meant no harm. But I didn't join. I couldn't. I just smiled weakly and said I had something else to do. Her face fell for a moment, like she realized something wasn't right. But she didn't get up to follow. She didn't leave her seat next to him. She didn't ask if I was okay. And that was the moment I knew I was losing the place I once had in her life. It wasn't just the library. It was everywhere. In the hallways when she walked with him instead of waiting for me. In the canteen where their laughter blended while I sat silently with my usual friends. In group activities where she paired with him without hesitation. She was changing, and he was becoming the center of that change. But the real shift happened during a class presentation. Ina and Farhan were partners, and I watched them from my seat as they spoke confidently, finishing each other's points like they'd practiced for hours. They shared smiles, inside jokes, and a comfort that looked too natural, too familiar. When the class clapped, Farhan nudged her lightly and she laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear in that soft, shy way she used to do only around me. That small gesture felt like a punch to the chest. After class, I finally confronted her. "You've been spending a lot of time with him," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She blinked, surprised. "Well, yeah, he's in my group. That's all." Her expression changed, confusion first, then a flicker of defensiveness. "What do you mean, that's all?" "He's just a friend." I nodded. "Okay." But she could tell something was bothering me. "You're acting weird," she said gently. "Why are you upset?" I wanted to say it. I wanted to tell her that it hurt watching her laugh with him, talk to him, choose him. I wanted to tell her I missed her, that I felt like I was slipping out of her life. But I didn't, because I was afraid of sounding jealous. Afraid of losing the little place I still had. So I forced a smile. "I'm not upset." She looked at me for a moment, long enough to know I was lying. But she didn't push. She just nodded and walked away. With him. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every little moment between them, every smile, every glance, every laugh. I hated myself for feeling jealous, but I couldn't help it. She was my closest person, my childhood, my comfort, my quiet dream. And now she was giving parts of herself, parts that used to belong to only me, to someone else. But the worst part wasn't that she liked him. The worst part was that she wanted me to see it, as if she needed my reaction, as if she wanted to know I cared, as if she was testing something in me she couldn't figure out on her own. Maybe she didn't mean to. Maybe she wasn't doing it intentionally. But intention doesn't lessen the pain. Actions still hurt the same. The next few weeks were a blur of watching her try a little harder whenever he was around, fixing her hair when he walked by, laughing louder when he joked, standing straighter when he talked to her. And every time she did it, she would glance at me, just for a split second, like she was checking something, measuring something, waiting for me to react. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because reacting meant admitting my feelings. Reacting meant giving her power. Reacting meant risking everything. So I stayed silent. And my silence made her try harder. One day after school, I saw them at the canteen laughing about something. Ina looked beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten. Her eyes bright, her smile effortless. She tossed her hair back and looked over at me with a quick glance. I didn't look away. I just looked through her. Her smile faded. Maybe that was the moment she realized she wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. Maybe that was when she decided to push further. Because from that day on, everything she did with him felt deliberate. Louder. Clearer. Designed to be seen. The small gestures grew bigger. The harmless smiles turned into long conversations. The casual studying turned into walking home together. The friendly teasing turned into something more, something almost intimate. And all of it felt like a message. A message meant for me. She was trying to impress him. But she was also trying to test me. To see if I'd break. To see if I'd fight. To see if she mattered enough for me to react. But I didn't. And that silence, my silence, would soon lead her to do something even bigger. Something that would push our story into a direction neither of us could control. But that comes later. For now, all I knew was this. The girl I grew up loving was trying to impress another guy. And I didn't know whether she was doing it for him. Or for me. If the distance between us was painful, and Farhan's presence was unsettling, then what came next was the twist that turned my quiet heartbreak into a storm. Because this was the chapter where Ina stopped drifting away naturally, and started pulling me into her game. The jealousy trap. At first, I didn't realize it was a game. It didn't feel like one. It felt like a series of small, painful coincidences. Things I tried to overlook, things I tried not to think too deeply about. But looking back, the signs were obvious. Way too obvious. It began the morning I walked into school and saw Ina standing with Farhan near the gate. They were talking, laughing softly, sharing a conversation so private it felt like I was intruding by simply existing. She never used to laugh like that in the morning. She was always lazy, half asleep, annoyed at the world until noon. But suddenly she was glowing. When she saw me approaching, her smile didn't fade. Instead, she tilted her head and said loudly, "Oh, Farhan, you're so funny." As if she wanted me to hear it. As if the laughter wasn't meant for him at all. But for me, I walked past them without looking twice. But inside, something twisted sharply. That was the beginning. The next trap came during lunch. I sat with my usual group, but my attention kept drifting toward where Ina sat with her new friends. And with him. They were sharing fries, leaning close, whispering things that were clearly not meant to be shared publicly. She kept glancing at me every few seconds. Not by accident. It was too frequent, too intentional, too calculated. Like she wanted to see something in my eyes, anger, jealousy, pain, anything. But I gave her nothing. I forced my expression to remain blank, my posture still, my gaze steady. And that's when it happened. Farhan casually put his arm around her chair. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. The implication was enough. Ina didn't flinch. She didn't move away. She didn't correct him. She just glanced straight at me. Her eyes were searching, like she was waiting for me to react, waiting for me to stand up, waiting for me to claim something she wasn't sure I still wanted. But I stayed silent. I didn't even blink. Her smile faltered. And I knew in that moment, that my lack of reaction hurt her more than anything else. But she didn't stop. No, my silence only pushed her further. When someone wants your reaction but you give them none, they start raising the stakes. And that's exactly what she did. The trap tightens. One afternoon, while walking home, I heard someone call my name. It was Ina. She ran up to me breathlessly, falling into step beside me like old times. "Hey," she said lightly. "You left school early today." "No reason to stay," I replied simply. She looked at me with a strange tension in her eyes. "Did you see me and Farhan practicing for the debate?" "Yes." And what?" She frowned, frustrated. "You didn't think anything of it?" I shrugged. "Looked normal." Her steps slowed. "So, you really don't care?" That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about Farhan. This wasn't about feelings. This wasn't about something real. It was about me. She wanted a reaction from the one person who had always been steady in her life. She wanted proof that she mattered. She wanted reassurance I wouldn't leave, even if she played with fire. But I refused to burn. "I don't understand what you want me to say," I told her quietly. Ina opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just looked at me, hurt, confused, maybe even angry, and then walked away without saying goodbye. And the real jealousy trap began the next day. The public display. It was Friday. Crowded hallway. Everyone rushing between classes. I was talking to a friend when I heard giggling behind me. The familiar kind, the kind that used to be meant only for me. Before I turned, I already knew. Ina. She was standing close, way too close, to Farhan. He had one arm around her shoulder, pulling her slightly toward him. She didn't stop him. She didn't move away. She looked directly at me as she leaned into him. Her eyes weren't happy. They weren't romantic. They were searching. Desperate. She wanted me to flinch. She wanted me to glare. She wanted me to confront her, or him, or both. She wanted chaos, something dramatic enough to prove I still cared. But I refused to give her the satisfaction. So I just turned back to my friend and continued talking like nothing happened. Ina's smile froze. Slowly, she stepped away from Farhan. She looked down, her hands tightening around her bag. Even from a distance, I could feel the storm in her chest. Because she didn't get what she wanted. She failed. And this failure frustrated her more than anything before. The confrontation. After school, she found me near the bike stand. She walked straight up to me, eyes burning with unspoken emotions. "Why didn't you say anything?" she demanded. "About what?" I asked calmly. She scoffed, angry now. "You know what? You saw what happened." "I did. And you don't have a problem with it?" "No." Her jaw tightened. "You're lying." "I'm not." She stared at me, hurt, furious, confused, all at once. Finally, she said quietly, almost in a whisper, "Do I not matter to you anymore?" For a moment, for the smallest moment, my heart almost softened. The vulnerability in her voice was real, raw even. But then I remembered. She was trying to control me through jealousy. She was testing me without understanding the cost. She was risking our bond, just to see if she still had power. So I didn't answer her question. I simply said, "You should go home. It's getting late." Ina looked like she had been slapped. She blinked rapidly, swallowed hard, and stepped back. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsure of herself. And that's when I realized. She never wanted Farhan. She never wanted a new world. She just wanted me to hold on. But she chose the wrong way to make me show it. This jealousy trap was never meant to hurt me. But it ended up hurting her more. And it would only get worse from here. Because the more she tried to get my reaction, the more I ignored her. The closer we came to the breaking point neither of us was ready for. There comes a moment in every story, every heartbreak, every turning point, where silence says more than words ever could. For me, that moment happened on an ordinary evening, under an orange sky, with the girl I once believed I'd spend my entire life with standing just a few feet away. And yet, those few feet felt like an entire world I could no longer cross. I didn't plan to walk away. Nobody really plans moments like these. They arrive like sudden storms, unannounced, unstoppable, and strangely cleansing. It started with a simple message from her. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me still reacted the way I always had, heart tightening, mind instantly replaying all the memories we shared. Childhood streets, school corridors, long calls at night where we talked about everything and nothing. The promises whispered in the spaces between growing up. But now all those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Someone who still believed she'd never hurt me the way she did. Still, I replied. Okay. Where? The old playground, she said. The place where it had all begun. I went there even though I knew I shouldn't. Maybe a part of me wanted closure. Maybe a part of me wanted her to admit what she did. Or maybe a small piece of the old me still wished she would turn around and choose me, even after everything. When I reached the playground, she was already there, sitting on the swing we used to fight over as kids. The moment she saw me, she stood up quickly, almost nervously, as if she wasn't sure how to begin. Hey, she said softly. Hey, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. There was a time when just looking at her made everything inside me feel lighter. But now, I felt nothing but a tired heaviness in my chest. Pain changes you like that. She stepped closer. I didn't think you would come. I said I would, I replied simply. She nodded and looked down at her hands. I guess I deserved that. Silence stretched between us, awkward, heavy, unfamiliar. We had talked for years without ever needing to think about our words. Yet now, both of us seemed scared to speak. Finally, she exhaled shakily. I know you're hurt, and I know it's my fault. I didn't deny it. I shouldn't have tried to make you jealous, she said, voice trembling. It was stupid. I thought. She paused, searching for the right words. I thought maybe you'd fight for me if you felt threatened. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully familiar. This idea that love was something you had to push, provoke, or test. You went too far, I said quietly. You didn't just try to make me jealous. You let another guy think he had a chance. You let everyone think it. I know, she whispered. And I regret it every second. I looked at her carefully. Why? Because you miss me, or because it didn't work? Her eyes widened, and I could see the truth right there, raw and unfiltered. She wasn't sorry because she hurt me. She was sorry because I didn't react the way she expected. She had expected rage, possessiveness, a dramatic fight for her attention. She had expected me to cling to her. She had expected me to fall apart. But I didn't. And that's what bothered her the most. I never wanted to lose you, she said. I thought you'd come running if you saw someone else close to me. I shook my head slowly. That's not love. That's manipulation. Her shoulders trembled. For a moment, she looked like the girl I once knew, warm, childish, honest. But that image faded quickly beneath the weight of what she'd done. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. I miss how you made me feel safe. I let her words sink in, but they didn't hit the way they once would have. Because somewhere along the way, I had realized a painful truth. I spent years making her feel safe, but she never once tried to make me feel secure. That imbalance had always existed. I just hadn't seen it before. She reached out and gently touched my hand. For a moment, I didn't move. Her touch felt familiar, but her intentions didn't. I want things to go back to how they were, she said. Can't we fix this? I pulled my hand back slowly. She flinched. No, I said, not harshly but with finality. We can't. Her lips parted, and the hurt in her eyes twisted something inside me. But I didn't let it weaken my resolve. You didn't lose me because of that guy, I continued. You lost me because you didn't trust my love unless you were testing it, breaking it, pushing it. She looked like she was going to cry. I didn't know you'd give up. I didn't give up, I corrected. I walked away. She shook her head weakly. You didn't even fight for me. This time I did laugh, but it was cold, tired, and sad. I shouldn't have to fight for someone who was supposed to be on my side. For the first time since I'd arrived, she went completely silent. And in that silence, I could feel it, something breaking. Something ending. She stepped forward again, as if reaching for the past. I stepped back as if protecting the future I wanted. I loved you, she whispered. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But the boy who used to hang onto her words was gone. I know, I said quietly. But love isn't enough if respect isn't there. The sun had nearly disappeared, leaving the sky dim and bruised with evening colors. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had finally grown. I never thought you'd leave, she said, voice cracking. I know, I replied. That was the problem. I turned around, not dramatically, not with anger, but with clarity. A simple, calm step away. For the first time in years, walking away didn't feel like running. It felt like choosing myself. I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared about me more. Behind me, she called my name once, twice, softer each time. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't break. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the person you once believed you couldn't live without. And so I walked forward alone but free. And for the first time in a long time. That was enough. Regret doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips in quietly, days, weeks, or months after a mistake has already been made. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it breaks, and sometimes it hits like a wave too strong to stand against. For her, regret came slowly, then all at once. It began the morning after I walked away from the playground, the place where our childhood started and our story ended. She woke up expecting everything to return to normal, expecting me to message her like I always did, expecting me to still be the boy who never left no matter how hard he was pushed. But her phone remained silent. No good morning. No are you okay? No checking up on her. No waiting for her. For the first time in years, she felt what it was like to live a day without my presence. And that absence hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. At first, she told herself I just needed space. Then, hours later, she began to realize something far more painful. I wasn't waiting anymore. And that was the beginning of her downfall. A week passed. She tried to distract herself, the way she always did. She hung out with friends, scrolled through old photos, replayed our memories, and even went back to the guy she had used to make me jealous. But something had changed. She didn't laugh the same way. She didn't smile the same way. She didn't feel the same way. Because now, she finally understood what she had taken for granted. The kind of love that doesn't seek attention, only connection. The kind of love that is loyal without conditions. The kind of love that stands beside you, not behind you. And she had thrown it away for a moment of pride. Her friends noticed too. You haven't been yourself lately, one of them said. I'm fine, she lied with a practiced smile. But even they could see her breaking, piece by piece. Everywhere she went, she kept expecting to run into me. At the store, at school, on the street, on social media. But each time she saw I was absent, something inside her twisted painfully. It wasn't until she saw me again, by accident, that regret finally hit her in full force. It happened on a rainy afternoon. I was walking out of a cafe with a notebook in one hand and my headphones in. I didn't notice her at first. But she noticed me immediately. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't breaking. I looked peaceful. And that was what hurt her the most. Because she had expected me to be miserable without her. She had expected me to look lost. She had expected to see pain in my eyes. Instead, she saw something else. A version of me she had never truly appreciated. A version of me she didn't help create. A version of me who didn't need her anymore. I walked right past her without even realizing she was there. No hesitation. No pause. No familiar spark. Just nothing. She felt the sting of that moment like a punch to the chest. She called my name softly. I turned around politely, nothing more. No warmth. No anger. Just a simple acknowledgement. Hey, I said, the same way you greet a stranger you vaguely recognize. That one word shattered her. Because that was the day she realized. I wasn't hers anymore. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Not even in memory. She stood there under the rain, her eyes wide, her breath uneven. You look different, she said, struggling to speak. I'm just doing better, I replied honestly. Her throat tightened. I can see that. She wanted to say more. She wanted to apologize again. She wanted to ask for another chance. But the moment had passed long ago. And she knew it. She swallowed hard. Did you really mean it? When you said we couldn't fix things? Yes, I said simply. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes but refusing to fall. Not yet. I didn't expect you to move on this fast. I didn't move on fast, I corrected. I just learned slower than I should have. That sentence broke her completely. For years, she had been the center of my world. She had been the girl I planned everything around. She had been the one I trusted with every version of me. Now she was just someone I used to know. You really aren't coming back, are you? She whispered. No, I said gently. I'm not. She closed her eyes tightly, as if those words were flames burning straight through her. When she opened them again, the tears finally fell. I thought I would always have you, she admitted, voice cracking. I know, I said. But you were wrong. She stepped forward. I miss you. More than I've ever missed anything. I know, I repeated softly. She looked desperate, not for attention, not for validation, but for a moment of the past she could no longer reach. Her regrets were finally catching up to her. I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you walked away, she said. I did, I replied. That's why I walked away. Silence wrapped around us like the rain, cold, heavy, unrelenting. Then she said the words she had been avoiding since the beginning. I lost you, didn't I? Yes, I said finally. You did. Her breath shattered. She sank down onto a nearby bench, covering her face with trembling hands. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just a girl who finally understood the weight of what she destroyed. I didn't give her a speech. I didn't comfort her. I didn't stay. I just walked away, calmly, quietly, because some stories end long before the characters realize it. And as I walked into the rain, leaving her behind, she whispered to herself through tears. I never thought losing him would hurt this much. But that's the thing about people like me. We don't leave easily. But once we're gone for good. And that was the day she realized. What she lost was something she may never find again.